The story of the Interceptor, 2022. The U.S. has 2 interceptor launch sites aimed at intercepting any nuclear warhead launches. The first, Fort Greely in Alaska, is attacked by unknown assailants presumably affiliated with the terrorist faction, while 16 nuclear warheads are simultaneously seized from Russian territory. The second site is a remote platform in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Captain J.J. Collins is recently reassigned to the latter of the 2 interceptor missile launch sites. Following the conclusion of a high-profile case, where she reported sexual misconduct by one of her superiors, she experienced hazing, bullying and threats from her peers in the military as revenge, hence her new deployment to this remote station. Under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Marshall and working alongside Baker and Shaw in the station's command center, Collins finds herself as part of the last line of defense after the hostile takeover of Fort Greely. The station is infiltrated by a small group of operatives led by ex-military intelligence soldier Kessel, who promptly kill Marshall and the other occupants of the base, leaving only Collins, Shaw, and an unconscious Baker, who was grazed by a stray bullet, as the survivors hold up in the command center. The infiltrators attempt to negotiate entry into the command center, by which they can disarm the interceptor system and leave the continental U.S. open to nuclear attack from the 16 stolen warheads. They are rebuffed, however, and attempt to forcibly enter instead with blowtorches. An operative launches a surprise attack after entering via a floor hatch, but is defeated and killed by Collins and Shaw. Baker regains consciousness and reveals himself to be an inside man for the infiltrators and motivated by a big payday, holding both Collins and Shaw at gunpoint while allowing Kessel and the remaining operatives to enter and assume control. Kessel hijacks a live feed and streams his anti-American manifesto online, naming the 16 American cities to be destroyed and instructing the terrorist faction to launch the nukes immediately. Collins breaks free of her restraints and locks Kessel, Baker, and a henchman back out of the command center while defeating and killing Kira, the lone enemy operative still in the room, and another henchman. Kessel attempts to force Collins to surrender, torturing her father, but she refuses, and her father is apparently killed when the transmission is cut. Kessel turns to Plan B, initiating the station's scuttling protocol, hoping to sink the station if he cannot take control of it. As the station begins to sink, Shaw volunteers to drop through the floor hatch to the ocean below and manually re-engage the station's hatches in order to slow down the station from sinking, such that the interceptors are still able to launch and destroy the warheads when they eventually pass through the airspace overhead. Shaw succeeds, but he is killed by Baker. Collins decides to make a risky gamble, hiding in the command center and letting Kessel, Baker, and the remaining henchmen take over and disable the seemingly empty center. Her ruse works, with Baker going to check up on the station's roof to find and eliminate her. Collins is able to stealthily dispatch the remaining henchmen, while Kessel flees the room. Grabbing a laptop, Collins ascends to the roof and plugs the device in, hoping to manually launch the interceptor missiles using this method. She is found by Baker, however, and the two engage in hand-to-hand combat, with Collins emerging victorious after using razor wire to decapitate Baker. Kessel, who had called in a Russian submarine to pick up the team of operatives earlier, finds Collins just as she successfully launches the interceptor missiles with a fraction of a second left before the nukes would have crossed the point of interception. His plan failed. He engages in combat with Collins, who manages to defeat and subdue him, just as the Russian submarine ascends from the sea. A pair of Russians emerge from the submarine tower, but rather than shooting Collins, they fire at Kessel instead, and the Russian captain salutes Collins before departing. Collins later recovers from her ordeal in the hospital, and she is personally given a promotion by the U.S. president for her efforts. She also receives a visit of her father, who had been rescued by friends who had witnessed his plight on the live broadcast, and he comforts her over her grief for Shaw's death.